The mic is working. That's good. And I've got a live stream and it selected a photo for me. Interesting. Interesting. Right. Go ahead and get started. Should have one view popping up in just a moment because I am opening it up to see. Hold on. Let's see. Is there audio? Is there any audio at all? Okay. So there is some audio. Wow, this is awful audio. Okay. Great. So maybe I'll be skilled enough to edit out that first bit. But today I'd just like to go over sort of the game plan for this series. I plan once a week to stream live, probably on Wednesday nights, maybe sometimes on Friday nights if a guest speaker can't make a Wednesday night. These sessions should be about 30 to 45 minutes max. And I'll just start out by going over some plant news. There'll be events or announcements. I'll discuss a topic. Some examples that I've heard are land stewardship or conservation, gardening with native plants, some science behind native plants, the science of cultivars, the science of local ecotypes, how to identify plants. I'll probably also be doing some live streams going through iNaturalist observations and showing you my thought process of identifying plants in real time. Maybe there'll be some sessions where you can send me your mystery plants and I'll do my best to identify them. We'll hopefully have quite a few guests, maybe even some panels to discuss things like propagating native plants, native landscape design, conservation and ecology. And then there'll always be some time for question at the end. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started with seeing if I can change my capture to, there we go, to iNaturalist. And then I'm going to pull up the screen on my phone so I can make sure that when I step off this, that it actually is showing you what I wanted to show you. So what I have pulled up right here is the iNaturalist Project Pollinator Associations. And so what this is, it's about 15,000 observations in Mississippi that people have taken of insects on plants and hummingbirds as well. Now this number right here says 13,000 because I've gone ahead and excluded any photos that were marked with all rights reserved. So when you upload something to a naturalist, you have the choice to either make it publicly available for commercial or non-commercial usage. You can specify that, or you can reserve all rights. And I'm not going to show anyone's photos who has all rights reserved because I don't want to violate their rights. But what you can see here is that you have all of these amazing photos ranging from really high quality photos with a macro photography to plant photos with an iPhone, and they're all valuable. So you don't have to feel bad about your level of photography. Anything you can do can contribute. And just scrolling through here, you can see just the awesome variety of different pollinators, ranging from the Delta flower scarab beetle, which has this Greek letter delta on its back, to bumblebees and carpenter bees, and some really awesome things. If you look at it closely, this carpenter bee has this pollen on its back. That's all from purple passion flower. And the way purple passion flower's flower works is it has these parts that contain the pollen, and these parts that are going to develop into the seeds. And so in the morning, these parts that have the pollen are at about the same level as the back of a carpenter bee, because carpenter bees are their main pollinators. So they come, they pollinate this, they get covered in pollen, and then later in the afternoon, they're continuing to visit it for nectar. The nectar comes out of these little wells at the base of these tendrils, I guess you could say. And this part, the part that contains the egg, lowers down so that it can start scraping pollen off the top of this and get pollinated. And the reason why they do this is because the plant, it doesn't want to get pollinated with pollen from the same flower. It wants the carpenter bee to come and visit the flower, get pollen on it, and then carry that pollen far away. And normally, by the time the afternoon rolls around, the carpenter bee is quite a bit away from where it was when it got the pollen on it, until it's able to more effectively transfer that pollen and exchange those genes. So the way that this works is you just take pictures of anything that you see, and someone like John Asher, who's a very good professor, probably the best bee identifier in the world, he'll come through and he will add an identification. And he's added an identification to almost every bee in Mississippi. And then I come through and I add what plant it was visiting. And together we're able to get a very good picture of what insects are visiting what plants in different parts of the state in different times of year. Yeah, so this is a great example of the science that you can do just in your backyard with native plants, or non-native plants for that matter. This is not specific to native plants. We want to get a good idea of, even with invasive plants, we want to know what's pollinating them, and that way we know potentially, like, there's some invasive bees as well. If those invasive bees are pollinating invasive plants, then that can inform conservation decisions. So that was one part of the topic that I wanted to discuss today. The other topic was just how I identify things. So here we have a naturalist observations that are once again filtered to ones that are not all rights reserved. And these are things that need to be identified that are in the mint family, the Myiaceae. And so I'm just going to click on one. I'm going to look at it. I might zoom in and look for any diagnostic features that tell me what this is. So right off the bat, you see this user has already offered identification. They think it's common sulfule. I agree. I'm going to be a little bit more specific. This is Prunella vulgaris lanceolata. And you can tell this because it has what are called lanceolate leaves. It's kind of hard to see, but the leaves kind of look like the tip of a spear, versus Prunella vulgaris have leaves that look more like eggs, that are more oval. And Prunella has a very distinctive looking flower. is one of those plants that you really don't need to key it out. You can just look at it and you can tell, yeah, that's prunella. So that's a pretty simple identification. Moving on to a Scutellaria. Ooh, Scutellaria are so tough. I am not good at identifying them. So I'm going to pull up Weekly's Flora, and I'm going to search. And basically what I'm going to do first is see, they think that this is Integrifolia. So those are some pictures you can see. So what I'm going to do is showing keys, and let's just see. So are the mid to upper leaves mostly elliptic, mostly entire, or serrate? And there are nice little definitions on the sides. Entire means have an unbroken margin versus serrate means it has a jagged margin. The difference between entire and serrate leaves is one of the basic things that is useful to know when you're identifying plants. And if we go back to this, let's look at the leaves. So yeah, those look like they're entire leaves. We're off on a good start. Leaves with entire margins not only confined to just below the inflorescence, that's the flower. Lowest pedicels of the main inflorescence, mostly less than 4 millimeters long, and it gives information about the habitat. And so it's trying to tell us how to differentiate this Scutellaria integrifolia from this Scutellaria arenicola. Now, if I have my my memory serves me correctly, probably we're wasting our time here because this plant is only found in Florida and it used to be found in Georgia. And Weekly's Flora, the square means it's native. If it's filled in, it means it's common. If it's empty, it means it's rare. And the H means it was recorded there historically, but it has not been located there in a very long time. So that's kind of a dead end because we did all that reading to figure out is it integrifolia or renicola, and it's not a renicola because it's in Mississippi. So now the next thing to look at, basically the way that you do is you work all the way up this until you figure out what plant it actually is. And as you can tell, this is a long key. It'll be pretty boring for me to do it this whole way. So what I would do if I came across this observation is I would just skip it. There's another integrifolia. Now this one person is saying it's elliptica versus integrifolia. And I don't know how to tell those apart. Now here's something I should know how to identify. Stachys floridana. So this, it's easiest to identify when it's in flower. These are the calyxes. You can see they've got some developing seed inside of them. Calyxes are the leafy stuff at the base of flowers. And when the flowers fall out, oftentimes the calyx will persist and grow around the seed. But the way that I can really tell this is Florida hedge nettle, Stachys floridana, is because of these pretty distinctive leaves. I think the technical term for this would be cerulate, and then they got these prominent midveins, kind of blunt-tipped leaves. A very weedy plant, native to Florida, spreading up into Mississippi in recent years. You can also identify these by digging them up because they'll have a rattlesnake-looking root. So I'm just going to agree with this identification. Now this is another plant that's in the mint family, beautyberry. Beautyberry has pretty distinctive leaves, but you can also recognize it by these flower buds that will become flowers and fruit that come just out from the base of the leaf petioles. That's American beautyberry. Now this, someone is saying this is Salvia greggii. We can look at the map here, and we can see that it looks like it's mostly distributed in Texas and westward, with a few scattered observations here. And if I were to zoom in, I'm not going to zoom in for sake of privacy, but I would suspect that this was planted somewhere. You can tell because of the mulch down here, and also the fact that this is out of range, and it looks like a cultivar. So I cannot confirm or deny whether it is Salvia greggii, but I am pretty sure this was cultivated. So I'm going to go ahead and click that mark, and that will be useful for researchers who are trying to understand the natural ranges of species. And you can see here, these are the calyxes of this plant. Oftentimes with mints, the calyxes will be persistent. That can be a decent rule of thumb. Another thing with mints in the Lamiaceae family is that the stems are square. So you can kind of see the stem isn't round, it's squared on the sides. And there are some other families, like the Verbena family, that will also have that, but it's a pretty good way to recognize mints. Okay, Hedioma hispida, rough false pennyroyal. I think this identification is correct, but if I remember correctly, there are a few Hedioma species in Mississippi that could be difficult to tell apart. So I'm going to search for this species. It occurs in Mississippi, and you can see this is probably a pretty weedy species because as you go further east, you see these triangles, which means that it's exotic. And by the fact that it's not filled in, that means that it's rare. So this plant is native here and has spread further out east because it's weedy. And this diamond shape means that it may be exotic, it may be native, they're not quite sure. So going over to keys, and let me go ahead and real quick check my chat. This might end up showing you a recursive thing. Okay, no chats have been received. I'll go ahead and open this up. So there are only 3 species in the genus Hedioma within the region of the southeast. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just check these other 2 species to see, do they even occur in Mississippi? This one does not. Hedioma polygioides does not occur in Mississippi, so I don't need to think about that as a possibility. And then Hedioma Drummondii does appear to occur in Mississippi rarely. It's got a disjunct range, which means that it occurs in Mississippi and Alabama, and then there's a gap in its range, and then it's more common out west. This is a fairly common common pattern. If I had to guess, this is probably a plant that is restricted to the Black Belt Prairie in Mississippi and Alabama, because that can be pretty similar to the prairies in Texas and Oklahoma. So going back to the key, how do we tell these 2 apart? Are the calyx teeth convergent and Drummondii are spreading or divergent? 2 slightly more convergent, lower. That's a subtle detail. Let's go ahead and see if we can tell from this. It looks like the calyx lobes are spreading. I wouldn't call that convergent. But let me go ahead and double check that with an image. Oh, there's no image of Hedioma drummondii here. Yeah, so I would say just based on that first characteristic, this is probably Hedioma hispida. So I think that's probably good enough information, along with the rarity of Hedioma drummondii Mississippi, to go ahead and hit agree. All right. Now, this one has just been identified to family. It hasn't been identified further. So what I'm going to do here actually is go to suggestions and see what the iNaturalist algorithm is thinking. It's thinking Clenopodium labellum, which does not, let's see if I can zoom out, does not occur anywhere near here, so that seems improbable. Clenopodium carolinianum, which does occur around there, or something else. Yeah, off the top of my head, this does not look super familiar to me, so I'm going to hold off on offering any identification to this. Next, someone says this is salvia. I agree. This is Salvia elaerata, a very common roadside and lawn weed. It's got these super distinctive calyxes where the top part of the calyx is kind of like a spoon, and then the bottom part has like almost a little fork thing going on. It's got these 2 tines, I guess you could say. It's got those square stems, so you know it's in the mint family. And what's not shown in this photo, but is pretty common, is their leaves, which are variegated. Usually they've got burgundy and green going on. Sometimes they'll have kind of a bronze color or a lime green color. A very pretty plant. Another Hedioma hispida, and it looks like these top calyx lobes are spreading while the bottom ones are converging, and so that lands it into Hedioma hispida. Physostygia angustifolia. This is a fun one. This is narrowleaf false dragon's head or obedient plant. You can tell that it's an obedient plant by these flower buds that will turn into flowers. That is called obedient plant because you can position the flowers. You can move them around and they'll stay in their new position. It's not called obedient plant because it stays where you plant it because it does spread. Now, this one's actually pretty easy to identify. There are two species in Mississippi, Physostygia angustifolia and Physostygia virginiana. Physostygia angustifolia blooms in spring or early summer, whereas Physostygia virginiana blooms in late summer to early fall. So this is definitely angustifolia. Some more hispida. We can look at the calyx lobes and agree. Scutellaria racemosa. Now this is one skullcap or Scutellaria that I can actually identify. It's diminutive and will have these light purple flowers with spots on the bottom part of the flower. Monarda fistulosa. This is pretty much the only Monarda that you'll find growing wild in Mississippi, so I can go ahead and agree. Clenopodium. This is Clenopodium gracile, a little exotic weed. You can identify it by the fact that it has these really, really small flowers and these kind of ovate leaves that are widest at the middle that also have these little serrations or teeth. Ajuga. There is one species of ajuga in Mississippi, Ajuga riptans. This is probably cultivated, but this can sometimes spread from cultivation, so I'm not going to mark it as cultivated. This is a Clenopodium. I bet this is Clenopodium carolinianum, but Clenopodiums are hard to identify, so I'm just going to skip this one. Another Monarda fistulosa. Yeah, I agree with that. There really isn't anything else that it could be. I suspect, though, because this looks like it is in the Delta, where this plant I don't think naturally grew, I would not be surprised if this was part of a wildflower planting, because it is pretty common in wildflower plantings around farms in the Delta. Salvia azurea. This is a great one. You can identify this by its dark square stem and then its very distinctive opposite leaves that are kind of long. I guess you call this lanceolate, and they are serrated. It's a pretty cool plant. Great pollinator plant. Some Stachys floridana. This was one of the first ones that we identified earlier. Now it's in bloom. You can see those distinctive leaves that are kind of rounded at the tip and have these blunt teeth along the edges. And the flowers themselves are pretty distinctive. Scutellaria parvula. Now, there are a couple of these Scutellaria that I cannot tell apart well. I think the other one's Scutellaria drummondii, so I'm just going to skip this one. Another Scutellaria, salvia. This is some sort of cultivated salvia. I don't know what type it is, though. More Scutellaria, Stachys floridana. I can hit agree. That's a nice, good picture of the flowers and the calyxes. These calyxes, once again, will persist after the flowers fall out. Some more Calocarpa americana. This one is not budding yet. It's just a little bit harder to identify, but I found that this bark with these little nodules on it is pretty consistent for this species, and the leaf shape is pretty identifiable as well. They also will often have this fuzzy vesture on their, or vestiture on their new stems. Some more Scutellaria racemosa. If you recall, these small flowers with polka dots on the bottom lip. You identify that. Calocarpa americana. Once again, you can see that fuzzy vestiture on the new tips and those distinctive leaves. And there we've hit 30 out of 405 observations in the mint family, Mississippi, that need identification. So I hope this gave you some insight and some ID tips on how to identify these mints on your own. Yeah. So for a first live stream, this has not been too bad, in my opinion. There's still a lot more that remains to be done. As a reminder to anyone who didn't already tune in, these live streams are going to be weekly, usually recorded on Wednesdays. They'll be available after the fact. I'll be covering native plants news, like events and announcements, covering topics, and I am more than welcome, more than open for topic suggestions. I think most of the time I'm going to try to lean on guests and panels to provide interesting things, as well as your feedback, your questions, comments, concerns. Identify this plant, help me figure out a plant to grow in this place, help me figure out what to plant to attract a certain pollinator. I can help with all that kind of stuff. I don't have a whole lot of time to prepare great content in advance, but maybe once or twice a month I can have a deep dive into the science of gardening for pollinators, or the science of cultivars versus straight species, how to grow a garden from seed versus from plants, whether to use plugs or larger plants, how much you should spend on a garden. All these sorts of things are things that I can help answer, especially with a little bit of prep time to put together a presentation. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to this. I think this is going to be awesome, especially as we have guests and especially as we get your feedback, the user, the listener. I really look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.